Halloween is the best time of the year to dress up and go to a party, even if it happens to be an office party. Many of us have to go to a work function like that, hoping to have a good time but not piss off the boss. But what if your work function Halloween party turned more deadly than anyone could have imagined?
Feel the chill in the air. Listen to the leaves rustle as they die and fall to the ground. It is Halloween. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Join me for a tale of Halloween. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's not Wednesday, oh no, but it is the Halloween season, and we have so many more stories to tell you. So this is yet another episode of Weekly Spooky just for you in our 31 days of Halloween content. I'm your host and narrator, Enrique Couto, and we have quite a story for you. David O'Hanlon has popped out another terrifying tale of Halloween horrors beyond at least my comprehension and probably yours as well. But before we get to the story, I want to say if you're new to the program, and many of you are, welcome. I hope you enjoy. We have 31 days of content coming out this month, but Weekly Spooky, much like the creatures in our stories, never dies. Every single week, we bring you a little bit of spooky to improve your week. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app, and while you're there, why not leave us a rating? 5-star rating can really make a big difference in helping new spookies find their way on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you want a little bit more of our community experience, you can head over to Facebook and type in Weekly Spooky's Tomb of Terror. That's where we all hang out, share memes and scary stories, weird news pieces, and so much more. It's quite the creepy community, and we'd love to have you. And if you want to support us in a more direct way, head over to weeklyspooky.com. We have merchandise like t-shirts, hoodies, and some collectibles as well. And if you must have more spooky, you can click on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get a bonus story every month. But now, my friends, the air is getting chilly as fall is here. So let's hear this story after these quick messages. Strife of the Party by David O'Hanlon. That's just nasty, Kesha said with a sour expression. Of course it's nasty. I'm a zombie. Bronson James shrugged. What do you want me to do? Twilight it up? Sprinkle glitter on the guts? Make the pus pink? Bronson was the next Stan Winston. He'd gotten his start doing low-budget effects tutorials on YouTube. When he got into college, he started making props for the drama club, which led to a makeup gig with the community theater and a public access variety show. Then he did the independent film Murder on Bonanza Ranch. Once the B Studios saw what he could do with a few $100, they were beating down his doors with a never-ending string of classy projects like Amityville Conjurer, Great Lakes Shark Attack, and the Cleveland Cleaver. The last one got him his first Chainsaw Award nomination at 25 years old. Naturally, he went all out designing his Halloween costume. We're a couple, Kesha huffed. We should have costumes that go together. What the hell goes with a zombie? I don't know, he admitted. Vultures? Maggots? That one asshole that swears he isn't bit even though everybody damn well knows he was? You want me to dress like a white guy? She asked with a raised eyebrow. It really is always a white guy, isn't it? Bronson reached to embrace her with his gory hands. She slapped them away. Nuh-uh, you are not touching me with all that on you. How about I draw up another zombie concept for you? It's good experience for the team and will be the unlife of the party. He spreads his hands wide, flicking fake blood on the walls. It'll be a romance to die for. How long did it take you to get into that costume? She asked. Only 3 hours. He smiled excitedly. I came up with this new 3 hours? Bronson, have you lost your damn mind? I'm not sitting in a chair while someone puts zombie makeup on me for 3 hours. That's only like 45 minutes longer than you spend putting on your regular makeup, he offered, regrettably. Oh shit. Go on. What would you like to say about my beauty routine? You don't like it? Is it too fake for the man that makes make-believe for a fucking living? Bronson sighed. There was ice skating uphill, and then there was arguing with Kesha once she got on a tangent. Only one of them was impossible. Is that what you meant? She continued. Are you comparing my makeup to your monsters? No. It was the only word he was going to get in. Maybe I should dress down like... What was her name? The skinny one with the flat ass who stole your car and left you broke. Charisma with a Z or some bullshit. Kesha spun around to leave the room. I'll go wash this off since you don't seem to like it. Her heels clacked across the hardwood floor almost as sharply as the bathroom door slamming a moment later. Bronson started counting silently. She was every bit as hot as a burning fuse and just as quick to explode. They had one of these arguments every other month, and he'd learned the rhythm of the fight. It was charisma with a Y that fucked him over and broke his heart, by the way. Bronson got to 8 when he heard the lock click open, and then the door banged against the stop before the knob would punch the drywall. She padded back into the room barefoot and working at her face with a makeup removal wipe. You know everyone at this party is going to be Ken and Barbie because of that dumbass movie. Maybe a few ghosts and sexy nurses. Anne from accounting will be a minion or whatever cutesy pajamas she can get last minute. But not you. She waved her hand at his costume. You don't even work for Hind and Hart. But you want to be the star with your Hollywood special effects and dangling guts. They're a nice touch, right? She put her clenched fists at her hips and scowled. I don't have to, I just thought you'd want to show off. I figured after you saw mine, you'd want something over the top too, so they'd all still be talking about your costume next Halloween. I want to show you what we could do. He twisted the latex intestines in his hands. We can do whatever costumes you want, babe. Really? You mean it? Sure, of course. He let the entrails fall and shrugged. You want to be Ken or Barbie? Bronson regretted not putting limitations on the whatever costumes you want bit. They stepped off the elevator into the grand hall on the 39th floor of the Hind & Hart corporate tower, wearing, as couples should apparently, costumes that went together. Awaiting them were no less than 24 Barbies mingled with their Kens. 2 They Live aliens that Bronson recognized as Kesha's friend Mark and his husband Stuart. There was a Dracula, and a Mina Harker, a Hawkeye and a Black Widow, a Bella and an Edward. For the most part, Kesha was right about the couples. There were the exceptions, of course, as well as the singles. To no one's surprise, there was also an abundance of Harley Quinn costumes, 2 from the animated series, at least 5 from the Suicide Squad films, and 1 from the Axel Braun parody thereof. A few Wednesday Addams clones lingered with wolfmen, superheroes, ghosts, ninjas, and a couple of Jasons, a piss-poor Michael, and 1 really well-designed mummy. A sexy Freddy gyrated on a man in a banana costume. A pair of inflatable dinosaur costumes butted heads. There was Anne in a 101 Dalmatians one-piece pajama. Bronson gave her a polite wave. She wagged her tail in response. At the bar, Gerard Hind wore a professional-grade Frankenstein costume that seemed appropriate for his powerful 6'5" frame. Without the makeup, Hind looked like a retired linebacker, not the architectural genius that he was. 3 interns in various stages of undress as sexy emojis, the evil, anger, and sad ones, cackled lasciviously at whatever the billionaire was saying. Security guard Tom patrolled the party topless as a dad-bod Rambo with his partner Jeanette, who at 63 looked anything but wondrous as Wonder Woman. Bronson recognized Winslow from the company's 4th of July party, despite his cleverly put-together spy costume that consisted of a trench coat and $2 mustache. Another man of mystery chatted it up with Winslow in an Invisible Man getup, while he tried to figure out how to take advantage of the open bar with gauze over his mouth. And at the opulent fountain occupying the middle of the hall was Robert Hart, dressed ironically and insultingly as a construction worker. The octogenarian had been born the 4th richest man in America and never worked a day in his life. He waved a hammer around like a scepter before the groveling peasants. Among them were Esteban and Carly from Kesha's department. Esteban wore a pirate costume like you'd see on a romance novel cover, with his broad, muscular chest revealed between the deep gash of the prissy V-neck collar. Carly, fully aware that she was a stone-cold MILF, had optioned to dress up as a genuine cougar, or at least a pair of whiskers and a tan bodysuit that hugged every curve. Then there was Kesha and Bronson in their matching costumes. He stared down at the gold buckles on his shoes and his ridiculous striped socks. Kesha adjusted his top hat with a happy squeal. "It looks great," she told him. "You really are the next Tim Savini." "It's Tom," he mumbled. He eyed her costume with the blonde wig, spiked gold bikini top, and short, matching skirt that showed off her legs in their entirety. He turned to face his reflection in the gilded elevator doors. "Yeah, well, at least one of us does," he said. "You said Halloween costumes should be scary," she reminded him. "This is my favorite horror movie." Leprechaun in Space isn't anybody's favorite horror movie, he grumbled. "It is when you've only seen 3 horror movies," Kesha shrugged. "It was this or that Slumber Party movie with the drill guitar. Slumber Party Massacre 2 was an option, and this is what you chose? Baby, you wouldn't look good in a teddy." She tugged at his fake beard. "Let's go. You need a drink before you shit shillings." The couple made it halfway to the bar before Kesha was stripped away from Bronson's arm by Carly to join the departmental mini-celebration. The world's largest online retailer was expanding to brick-and-mortar operations, and Kesha's design had gotten Hind and Hart the contract. Kesha waved him to go on without her. He would have regardless. The stupid costume was stifling, plus the pants were a size too small and had his shillelagh in a bunch, but at least it gave him the character's trademark waddle. He sidled up to the bar and stared at himself in the mirrored back. He hadn't had a say in the costume, but he'd done an excellent job recreating Warwick Davis's makeup. He tugged at the crotch of his trousers to free up space so he could mount the stool without tearing them. "Good thing the drinks are free," Hines said, lumbering over to Bronson. "I couldn't wrestle a piece of gold from you if there weren't." "Many fools have tried to separate a leprechaun from his ends," Bronson said, imitating the voice as best he could. "Many fools have died, and others became friends." Hind laughed. "That's a good one." "I don't get it," the intern dressed like a purple devil emoji said. "You wouldn't, kid." Hind waved her off and leaned on the bar so Bronson didn't have to strain his neck looking up at him. "You know, I took Jennifer Aniston to dinner once." "No shit," Bronson snickered. "No shit," Hind assured him. "Lisa Kudrow turned me down. I thought taking Jen out might make her jealous enough to reconsider." "Did it work?" "About as well as a fishnet condom." "At least it protects against the crabs," Bronson shrugged. Hind smiled. "I'm about to offer you a job so I have someone fun to talk to again." "I'll settle for a double Jameson," Bronson said. Better make it a single, Winslow said, stumbling to the bar and rattling the ice in his glass. The Golden Hind pours with a heavy hand. A couple of these and your after-party is going to look like stuffing a marshmallow into a keyhole. Maybe you're just a lightweight, Bronson said, clapping him on the shoulder. Good to see you again. So, double Jameson for my new friend and water for... Do you even work for me? Hind made a show of trying to see through the shitty spy outfit. Oh, Winslow from marketing. Right. That explains why you're shit-faced off a Bacardi Swizzle. Is that what that was? Winslow hiccuped. He clumsily straddled the stool beside Bronson. Tasted like acetone and Sunny D. A blonde sauntered past the bar, calling halftime on any further conversation, as the three men, and even the intern, watched her pass. Her blue shimmering dress dragged the floor with white ruffles at the hem and tassels along the arms and hips, swayed as if she brought her own breeze. Cockles decorated her hair and auger shells dangled from her ears along a thin porcelain neck. Talk about a glow-up, the intern said. That's Bea, Gleason's secretary. I don't remember seeing her at the 4th of July party, Bronson added. She's new, Winslow drooled. She went from nerd to knockout. Is she supposed to be Elsa? Bronson asked. The ocean, the intern corrected her. She rolled her eyes and turned to Hind. Can I get another mojito, boss man? No, the billionaire shook his head. You can't have another because you haven't had a mojito. That's a daiquiri in your hand. I took French, she shrugged. I don't know Mexican. Hind started to explain that daiquiri is a Tano word, then shook off the notion. His partner, the perpetual lech, hired the three interns to keep employee morale up. He turned to the wall of assorted alcohol to make the next round. Winslow leaned toward Bronson. The movement proved too much for his compromised equilibrium, and he toppled onto the leprechaun. Lad, you've had a few too many, yet you've had hardly any, Bronson said, getting into his character. That is some body of water, Winslow huffed. He gave a half-ass whistle. I'd love to disappear in her Bermuda Triangle. Bronson heaved Winslow back onto his stool. The two watched Bea make her way through the crowd. The employees and their +1s had all stepped aside as she flowed across the dance floor. She weaved through them in a wave-like fashion befitting her attire. Some seemed to drift after her, as if drowned into her wake. She was mesmerizing to watch, but her figure wasn't what had Bronson's attention. There was something off about her. Bronson couldn't put his finger on it. You're right. I'm done drinking. Winslow smoothed his fake mustache. Gonna go play in the ocean. I don't think your dinghy is up to the challenge, bud, Bronson said. Be sure to have a nice memorial tomorrow. Winslow tried to wink, but blinked both eyes instead. For all those seamen getting swallowed by the ocean tonight. Winslow slipped off the stool, stumbled, then corrected himself, and popped his collar up as he spy-walked after his quarry. Bronson shook his head. He turned around as Frankenhind set down the whiskey and clanked the glass with his own. You're Kesha's beau, aren't you? Hind asked. We haven't formally met. You're in movies, I hear. Yeah, I do effects for genre films. He learned that kept people interested far longer than saying he worked on horror flicks. I was going to wear something I'm designing for a new movie tonight, but Kesha insisted on matching costumes. I see. Hind looked around for Kesha and cocked his head, then looked back at Bronson. So, you two decided on Baywatch Leia and Spooky Smurf. Close enough. Bronson snorted and sipped his drink. Did she show you her concept for the new account? Hind asked. It's brilliant, modeled after the ruins of an ancient temple I discovered. Discovered? I was going to be an archaeologist originally, Hind told him. That's how I got into architecture. Unlike my partner, I wasn't born into money. I had to choose between digging up the past or building it here in the present. All of my works have utilized the aesthetics of ancient civilizations, sometimes even using original materials from historic sites. That's pretty awesome, Bronson said, taking in the room itself for the first time, ignoring the people and tacky furnishing. He could almost see it. What civilization is this? Roman, for the most part, but with a flourish of Persian. Hind gestured to the fountain. That's authentic. Found it tucked away in the Hindu Kush. Hart was still entertaining guests as he walked around the rim of the fountain. It seemed even more of an elitist dick move to Bronson, knowing the structure was over 2,000 years old. He'd assumed it was just a show of wealth, and it certainly was, so he hadn't paid it any attention before. The entire thing was carved to look like a mountain. Two figures stood facing away from each other at the top, with the water pumping out of the peak between them like a waterfall. Reliefs that had been worn by time ringed the base of the fountain, depicting people as if they were praying to the things above. In their religion, good and evil were twins, Hind explained. Ahriman, the devil, was a circumstance of their god's existence. Bronson tried to figure out which figure was supposed to be the evil one. They didn't look any different to him. Maybe that was intentional. People often did bad things with the best of intentions, after all. His mind wandered back to the woman dressed as the ocean. He didn't see her anymore. He also didn't see Winslow. He considered the possibility that the inebriated dweeb had indeed somehow seduced the mysterious woman, then settled on the more realistic possibility that he'd been abducted by aliens. What about this temple? Was that Persian too? Bronson asked before swiveling around on his stool. Kesha doesn't talk much about her process, just the final result. Oh, it is something much older. In fact, there's a significant debate if the culture existed at all. Hind looked suddenly excited. Say, would you like to see some of my collection? A lot more than I'd like to be sitting on this uncomfortable-ass stool. You guys can afford better cushions, Bronson joked. My partner picked them. He's got no point of reference, Hind said. His ass is usually cushioned by someone's lips. Hind rounded the bar and signaled for Bronson to follow him with an excited smile. Bronson gave the crowd another scan for the woman, then found Kesha, who gave him a curious look. He shrugged and followed her boss through a doorway beside the bar. Hind's boots clomped loudly as they proceeded through a narrow hall to a tiny stairwell. My escape route, Hind told him. When parties get to be too much, I can retreat to my office, and when work gets to be too much, I can retreat to the bar. The stairs played hell on Bronson with his tight trouser, and he didn't think the seams would hold the entire trip. Luckily, it was a short ascent to the next floor, and they came out right into Hind's lavish, but somehow still reasonably down-to-earth office. Bronson turned to take it all in and saw the door they'd entered through swing shut, revealing itself as a false bookshelf. That was exactly the kind of thing he'd buy when he made it big in Hollywood. Glass cases held various artifacts spread around the office, and Bronson made his way to them in turn. He paused at one filled with stone rubble covered in crude markings. Their alphabet is unique to them. No one even knows what they were called, Hind said. They built their cities on ancient coasts, which is why every site that's been found is submerged. The temple I spoke of was found 12 miles off the coast of Cyprus back in 1968. There's no other structure like it. It's almost as if the society rose out of the ocean itself. That's a crazy thought. Bronson moved to another case with a rock inside. It was clearly a sculpture, but time had destroyed any clue as to what it represented. I spent the last 2 years bringing the temple up, in pieces, much to my partner's dismay. Dismantling an ancient church does sound like the start of a horror movie. What did you do with the pieces? Reassembled them here in the sub-basement of this building. That's, wow, the whole thing? It wasn't whole after so long, unfortunately. I salvaged what I could and have been trying to figure out how to fill in the gaps for over a decade. It's a problem I was hoping to speak with Kesha about, actually. I want to bring her in. I've never had an employee with such talent. To fill in the gaps, Bronson repeated. Hind's smile slipped, in what appeared to be genuine hurt over the implication. He put a hand on Bronson's shoulder and gave him a gentle shake of his head. "What do you notice about all these pieces?" he asked. Bronson pondered on them. "There's no metal." "That's correct." Hind clapped with a small chuckle. "These people, whoever they were, built metropolises, while the rest of the world was still living in cages. If they hadn't died out, there's no telling how much further advanced we'd be as a species now. Understanding them, revealing their brilliance and intelligence to the world, that will be something that lasts longer than any building I've ever created." "How did they Bronson was interrupted by a pounding on the door. Hind stomped toward the center of the room. His body stiffened at the strangeness of the intrusion. "Who is it?" he shouted.
Did you hear that? Better check the locks on your doors. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
The door swung open. A disheveled man stumbled into the room and slammed it behind him. He fiddled with the locks before rushing to Hind. Bronson eyed him suspiciously. It was Halloween, but something bothered him about the man's costume. He wore a tattered, bloody toga. The gold laurels in his gray hair were bent and askew. He appeared to be dressed as Caesar after the surprise party. The man grabbed Hind's jacket and attempted to pull the much larger man close. "I knew you'd be here if you weren't at the party. I need you, Jerry. It was Robert's stupid idea. It's always his stupid ideas." Bronson stepped away from the two and nodded to the door. It was clearly business-related, and he wanted to get back to Kesha anyhow. She was probably tired of telling everyone who she'd come dressed as, and it wouldn't make as much sense without her leprechaun. Hind signaled for him to stay. "Whatever terrible business decision Robert made this time, he can afford to correct," Hind said. "You worry too much, Gleason." Bronson stiffened. The girl in the ocean costume was Gleason's secretary. That's what the intern had said. He wasn't sure why that bit of information made his blood go cold. He thought about the woman again. Something had been wrong with her costume. He almost had it when Gleason started shouting again. "Fuck the business, Gerard! This isn't about the company! It's about that!" Gleason jabbed a finger toward the door. "I didn't want anything to do with it." Robert insisted. He thought it would impress them. Your fancy fucking temple. He said they'd feel like princesses or some shit. "Who?" This time it was Hind with a fistful of fabric as he lifted Gleason off the floor. "Who did he take there?" "The secretary! My secretary!" Gleason looked around. "The nerdy one with the tits. We were going to fool around. You know how Robert is. He brought the 3 bimbos along. He told them it was the pre-party. I've been stuck down there with them all goddamn day in your stupid tomb." "I'm afraid I have to deal with this." Hind dropped Gleason to the floor. "Perhaps you can speak to Kesha. I can have you both down for a tour without imbecilic interruptions." "Yeah, that'd be cool." Bronson backed toward the door. "I should really go find her anyway. She's probably getting pissed." Bronson found his way to the elevator and chewed the inside of his jaw while he waited for the car. Fake blood was his business. No matter how real it looked, the smell was always wrong. So why could I smell it for real on Gleason's toga? He asked himself. As if the pants weren't tight enough, the whole scene with Gleason had made his ass chew up any slack they had to spare. The elevator opened and he stepped inside, pushing the button for the floor below. The 3 bimbos had to be the emoji triplets, he thought. His stomach soured. What did Julius Sleazeball mean? He'd been trapped with them all day. I just saw them, and the secretary. Hell, everyone saw her. They didn't look like they'd been in some dingy ancient temple all day. They damn sure didn't look like the hot mess that Gleason was. Why the fuck did the blood smell real? In the quick trip down, Bronson made up his mind to grab Kesha and get the hell out of there. Bronson gasped at a glimpse of his reflection in the parting doors. He stepped out and waved for them to hurry up and close again. He stared at himself this time. His chest tightened. Experience told him he was right. But if he was right, he needed to find B. Bronson scanned the crowd, but there was no ocean in the Cleveland high-rise. One of the emojis, the angry one, buzzed through the crowd. A glass broke and someone swore. Another person shouted a threat back. Bronson needed a better vantage point. He jogged to the fountain and pulled himself up by the ancient deity's body. A Malibu Ken was in a shoving match with Dracula. Bronson ignored them. B was all that mattered. The devil emoji's giggle carried over the crowd noise. Two of the partygoers were sucking each other's tongues while their dates looked on disapprovingly. Tom's camo pants were around his ankles as he stormed Barbie's dream house over one of the uncomfortable bar stools. Bronson spun back to the fight. More people were pushing each other now. Stewart and Mark were taking turns kicking the shit out of a Klingon. One of the Jasons was being choked out by Jeanette's golden lasso. The last of the interns, the sad emoji, moved through the fray, lightly dragging a finger across a wolfman's cheek. He squeezed the champagne glass in his hand until it broke. Bronson flinched, but the werewolf didn't. Not even when he drove the stem through his own eye socket. The pushing turned into a riot. The other side of the room had broken down into an orgy, and in both crowds, sobbing revelers found inventive ways to kill themselves. All three groups screamed in their own ways. The three emojis cackled over the din of death and ecstasy. Bronson spotted Kesha stumbling, trance-like toward Esteban. The pirate had dropped his cutlass to unsheath his sword. Kesha ripped his frilly shirt open, tearing furrows in his chest with her nails. Bronson jumped down from the fountain and charged to tackle Esteban before he could plunder the booty. A feral shriek pricked Bronson's ears a moment before someone plowed bodily into him, and they both crashed through a table together. Perfect landing, Carly meowed and licked Bronson's face. Don't worry, I've been spayed. This is not fucking happening. Bronson tried to shove the cougar off of him. She bit into his cheek until her teeth scraped bone. Bronson managed to roll over and the kitty quickly wrapped her legs around his waist. Her nails clawed at the heavy fabric of his jacket. Carly pulled her head back, taking most of his prosthetic cheek and part of his real one with her. She winked at him while she swallowed it. What's the matter, sugar? That the first time the pussy ate you? She gripped his throat and purred. You'd be lying if you said you didn't want this cougar. Bronson slipped the sack of prop gold from his pocket and used it like a sap to knock her unconscious. Even out cold, she still gyrated against him. He pried her legs apart and wriggled from their grasp. He ran over and swatted Esteban's hand with the sack as he peeled off Kesha's top. No need to cock block, Esteban rubbed his hand. I could use a first mate. Ahoy, sailor. Kesha wrapped her arms around Bronson's neck. You can scuttle me together. I'll take the aft, matey. Esteban grabbed Kesha by the hips. The fuck you will. Bronson swung his girlfriend to the side and cracked Esteban across the jaw. The pouch busted on impact, showering his unconscious body with loot. Looks like you found me gold, Captain Jack. Kesha's tongue played along Bronson's ear. He pushed her back and shook her. Now is not the time, and these are not the goddamn pants. He looked around at the chaos. We need to get away from the three emoticunts so you can snap out of this. Bronson pulled her arm and dragged her away. Where are we going? She whined. There's a perfectly good table to fuck on right there. I'm too horny for all this walking. There's a better table over here. Bronson pulled harder. I just don't want an audience. That sounds dull, the angry emoji said as she stepped in front of him. Everything is more fun in a crowd, but if the leprechaun doesn't want to get lucky, there is an alternative. The blade sank deep into his shoulder, and he whirled around, barely stopping short of punching his attacker. What the fuck, Kesha? He shouted. Sex and death are the foundations of a great party, the emoji growled behind him. Foundations. A light bulb clicked in Bronson's mind. He caught Kesha's wrists as she lunged to claw his face. She struggled to break free and he ducked to scoop her over his shoulder. She twisted the knife still lodged in his back, trying to free it for another attempt. As they hit the middle of the room, her hand moved from the hilt to caress his back, sensually. That made sense. Whichever emoji chick was closest would influence Kesha's behavior. Bronson stepped backwards until she tried for the knife again, and then immediately went forward until she started with the foreplay. He stopped between the 2 points. "What's going on, Bronson? Put me down!" she demanded. He did, but made sure not to let her step out of the safe zone. Kesha crossed her arms, quickly realizing she was topless. She covered her nipples with her palms and looked around at the literal fucking chaos occupying one half of the room and the ultra-violence on the other. What is happening? She threw her hands into the air and then immediately brought them back down to cover up. "And why are my titties out?" "Esteban took your top off," Bronson said matter-of-factly. "The murder-suicide orgy thing is because of the interns." "Goddamn sorority girls are always causing trouble," she mumbled. "We need to find B," Bronson said. "Oh, we do," Kesha huffed. "If this is about Esteban, I don't know what he was thinking. I told him that was a one-time deal. It doesn't have an... Wait, you actually fucked Esteban? Once! Before we were together? Before we were serious," Kesha shrugged. "What does that matter?" "Right now, it doesn't." He turned toward the elevator. "Oh, fuck me." "Exactly my plan," Carly said. Anger and the devil joined her on either side. Anne crawled in front of them on all fours. The ass of her PJs was torn open and blood stained her teeth, indicating that she'd had fun on both halves of the room. She licked her lips and yipped like a puppy. "We want your lucky charms, Bronson." She started to pant. "What the hell is going on here?" Kesha whispered in his ear. "It's called a party, you dumb bitch," the sad emoji said as she joined the others, blocking their escape. "You don't seem to like our treats, so how about a trick?" She patted Anne's head, and the accountant sprang from the floor and charged, not at them, but past them. She barked wildly as she sprinted across the room and threw herself through the floor-to-ceiling window. Bronson spun and shoved Kesha ahead of him. Someone clapped their hands and another person whistled. The party animals stopped their recreation of the entire Kama Sutra and turned their attention to the fleeing couple. Across the room, the brawlers disengaged from one another in a similar fashion. "Stop them!" the interns shrieked in unison. Bronson spotted Hines' escape route, but Kesha was too far ahead of him to get her. He passed it and tried to catch up. The crotch of his pants ripped from his waddling gait, finally freeing up his movement. He stumbled and nearly fell into the middle of a disentangling gangbang, but turned it into a diving roll that looked mostly intentional. He regained his footing and followed Kesha down a corridor. The mob swarmed the narrow passage on their heels with makeshift weapons and swollen sex organs as the powers of the interns converged into an insatiable, bloodthirsty lust. "Where are the stairs?" Bronson shouted. "Here!" Kesha hit the crash bar and toppled through the doorway, nearly going over the guardrail beyond. Bronson spilled in behind her and pushed the door closed as fast as he could against the hydraulic hinge. The crowd pressed against the other side. The door started inward. Bronson put his feet on the guardrail to brace it. "Push harder," Kesha demanded. "Maybe if you hadn't stabbed me." "That's not fair. I don't even remember stabbing you." "You remember Esteban stabbing you, though," Bronson grumbled as the door started to open again. "Take off my belt." "Not this shit again," Kesha sighed. "Not for that," Bronson said in a strangled voice. "Tie the handle to the bracket up top to buy us time." "Oh." She did what she was told, and the door jutted open a few inches but held firm. Hands lashed through the gap. Bronson sidled past them, and the couple descended the stairs, only to be greeted on the next landing by Winslow. His cheap mustache dangled from the corner of his blue lips, and his bloodshot eyes stared up at the ceiling. Kesha prodded his chest with her foot, causing water to spurt from his mouth. "I think he drowned," she said. "In a fucking skyscraper?" Bronson shook his head. It was B. Why are you so hung up on B? All this supernatural weirdness is happening, and you're getting jealous? You're the one that brought up Esteban, she said. Were you possessed by an evil emoji at the time? Bronson reached behind him and jerked the knife out of his shoulder. This is not your fault. Cheating on me was. Right now, we have 38 flights of stairs to climb down, and all your coworkers are trying to kill us and fuck us in no particular order because they've been brainwashed by the sorority house of 1,000 corpses. So excuse the hell out of me, but we will talk about that shit later. The sound of the horde battering the door ceased. Shit. Bronson held his breath. That's bad. Bad? They gave up. They're probably banging in the hall again. Or they're taking the elevator so they can get ahead of us. We need to get to the temple in the basement. Temple? Kesha raised an eyebrow. What does Jerry's pet project have to do with this? Bronson, tell me what's going on. Bronson didn't bother. He was 2 flights down before she started running after him. They hit the 27th floor when a door banged open above them. A few wails let them know they were no longer alone in the stairwell. Bronson thought about the weight limit of the elevator. The possessed would have to come down in groups, meaning a longer delay in the waves as they got further down. A door broke open 2 floors below and they took the next exit, running out into the drafting department. No one was waiting for them. We need to get to the elevators, Kesha said. They're using it, Bronson reminded her. We'll find a place to hide. Only one elevator goes above the 13th, Kesha wheezed, leaning on a drawing desk to catch her breath. We're below that. There are 4 more cars that go all the way to the lobby, and then we can get the hell out of here. Okay, yeah, that's good. Bronson spotted the bank of elevators. But we're not leaving.
More scares to come. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
He pushed the call button and one of the elevators dinged. They moved toward the parting doors when Robert Hart sprang on them. The geezer swung his hard hat, flooring Bronson with the first blow. He stood there with his flannel shirt open over his liver-spotted, saggy torso. His pants were gone, but he kept the costume's tool belt and work boots. A throbbing erection led the way as he stepped forward and put a domineering boot down on Bronson's chest. Kesha, Hart growled. I thought I was the boss around here, but it looks like you've given Bobby Jr. a raise. Looks like he's still coming up short, she fired back. Let's see if you still feel that way when we're finished. I even brought protection. He slipped the hard hat back onto his head. He took the hammer from his tool belt. Maybe I'll nail you to one of these desks. I prefer my humps to stay Ah! A hammer fell from his hands as he rushed to grab the stump spurting among the silver pubic hair. He stumbled away and Bronson sat up, slapping the dismembered member away from him. Hart backed into the wall and slid down it. The hypersexual curse of the emoji kept pumping blood to the missing organ. The geriatric watched in horror as the nub twitched with the final drips of his life. I guess you lost custody of Bobby Jr. Kesha stomped on the appendage and ground it into the carpet. Bronson picked up the hammer and held it up to the light. Yeah, thought so, he said, showing it to Kesha. See the blood? So what? We just left a riot upstairs, she said. Another elevator dinged, and the doors opened to an empty car. They jumped inside and pushed the button for the lobby as a gang of maniacs burst into the room. The doors closed and the car started down. They could hear the fists beating against steel above them. Bronson gave her the hammer. The blood is dry, he said. It's not from the party. It's from the pre-party him and Gleason threw. They rode down in silence. Bronson shucked off his costume, giving the coat to Kesha to cover her breasts. He peeled away the prosthetics last and glared at them mindfully. The elevator chimed at the lobby. The couple crossed to the maintenance door and descended down into the basement. 3 drowning victims in coveralls greeted them, but they didn't stop to examine the bodies. B had been there, which meant Bronson was right about the temple. Down in the sub-basement, salt water had flooded the area around the temple. Halogen lights illuminated the structure. B waited for them on the stone steps leading into the holy structure. Twin monoliths embedded with fossils of ancient sea life stood on either side of the entrance. Jack-o'-lanterns burned on the steps next to the scattered debris from Hart and Gleason's private party, including a discarded sad emoji costume. Bronson approached the secretary with his hands raised passively. "I know," he said softly. B looked at him curiously. She didn't stop him as he reached up and stroked her face, smudging the makeup and revealing the scaled flesh below. "You're not B," he told her. He tugged at the wig, pulling it away from the finned head. "I've done a lot of makeup and prosthetics. You did a really good job." The being stepped back and waved him into the temple. Kesha ran quickly to his side, but kept her eyes on the strange creature in the human costume. Its false eyes didn't blink as it watched them go by. Inside the temple, they found the first intern. Blood stained the wall where one of the degenerates had smashed her face against it. The angry emoji still had her costume on, but her head was a different story. A replica Roman dagger laid in a gory pool next to her. Sadness was slumped in the corner of the next room, wearing only her bra wrapped tightly around her throat. They entered the sacrificial chamber of the people that worshipped the sea and found the girl dressed like the ocean sprawled on the altar in the center of the room. A mosaic of shells and colored stones showed the creatures coming out of the waves to meet the chieftains of the ancient civilization. A worn, barely identifiable statue of a humanoid fish held an outstretched arm over the sacrifice. The other limb had broken off long before. Bronson walked on to the raised ring that surrounded the table. Bits of skull were indistinguishable from the broken seashells in B's bloody hair. Hart's hammer had reduced her face to a caved-in pulp. A flash drew Bronson's attention to the corner of the room. Gerard Hind puffed a cigarette to life and let the lighter go out. "Where's Gleason?" Bronson asked. Hind blew a spear of smoke from the corner of his mouth. He chewed the air, trying to find words that tasted right. "Where is he?" Bronson shouted. "Here," the voice whimpered. "I'm here." Bronson looked around, then up. Above them, Gleason dangled from his wrists like bait on a hook. Bronson looked at the massive CEO, who gave him a simple shrug instead of an answer. The fake bee entered the chamber. She peeled away her dress, revealing her mottled, platinum scales. "These are their gods," Hind explained. "Or their devils. Can't have one without the other, really. A sacrifice was made here." "And a prayer was answered," the fish person said. "Apparently they're not big on subtlety," Hind said. "B asked for vengeance, and that's what she got." "Not entirely," the entity corrected him. "We didn't do anything to her!" Kesha cleared her throat and lowered her voice. "I mean, all the rest of us were innocent." "No, we're not," Hind said. "We all knew what a lecherous piece of shit Robert was. He's been using his position to force himself on women for years, and we've all made it into a joke. He became a cliché old pervert that everyone made fun of around the water cooler, while he went on doing whatever he wanted. A malignancy starts small and spreads," the ancient creature said, joining Bronson and Hind next to B's body. "Robert Hart became emboldened by your apathy. He did this because you did nothing." "So, what happens now?" Bronson asked. You chose not to flee. You cared for this stranger. The being rested a webbed hand on B's mauled face. You may leave this place. I care about people. All of them, Bronson corrected the deity, including the ones that haven't been killed upstairs. I want everyone to leave. The thing glared at him curiously. Everyone? Well, not that motherfucker, Bronson pointed up to the suspended Gleason. He can die. Agreeable terms, but only if you are prepared to make a trade. Bronson thought about it. He turned to Kesha and took the hammer from her shaking hands. He stepped around the altar and presented it to the aquatic overlord. I killed the other one, the one that did this, he said. Neither he or this weapon will ever hurt anyone ever again. This is what I have to trade. Not good enough. The being stroked B's hair and gingerly lifted one of the auger shell earrings. It worked the hook from her lobe. You ask for many lives and bring me only one. 2, Bronson said, sharper than he meant. No way, pal, Hein chimed. I caught that twerp. The 2 of you will become our priests. The creature seized Bronson by the back of the neck and forced the earring through his lobe. This will be the symbol of our pact. Hind leaned on the altar so Bronson could see the other shell dangling from his ear. This sacred day you call Halloween, the creature continued. It is now our sacred day. You will bring me more like Robert Hart and Philip Gleason. You will split their chests and give their black hearts unto us. This is the trade for everyone. That's it? Bronson mulled it around for a half a second and nodded. Deal. Now I feel bad, Hein said. I didn't even ask them to let the rest of you go before I agreed. Dick, Kesha hissed. We're going to head out now, Bronson said. He patted the fish god on the shoulder and tried not to gag at the clammy, moist texture. Happy Halloween. Not yet. It caught him by the wrist. There is still one matter. A shimmering body slithered through the shadows at the base of the mosaic. Heavy, thick skin scraped stone as it moved around the room. The elongated fin cast a fluttering shadow in the worklights. A bulbous, yellow eye shined a moment before the thing sprang from the darkness. The 30-foot eel tilted its head and clamped down on Gleason's kicking legs. The monster tore the appendages away with its dual set of jaws. It snapped down for another bite, leaving only the bounded hands still dangling overhead as it retreated out of the temple and into the building's sub-basement. The 3 humans exchanged shocked glances. The deity clapped Bronson on the shoulder. Its maw spread to reveal dozens of serrated teeth in a gesture Bronson recognized as its terrifying attempt to smile. See you next year, priest, it said, and started out of the chamber. It paused in the doorway. I forgot my manners. Happy Halloween to you as well. You gotta hand it to our good buddy David O'Hanlon. He always knows how to deliver a story that is memorable, to say the least. Thank you, David. Oh, and believe me, we have a whole lot more coming from him. In fact, in the coming weeks, we actually have a couple of full books that he wrote that we'll be releasing right here on the feed. So keep an eye out and make sure you're subscribed. You are not going to want to miss it. And by the way, tomorrow we have another full episode of Weekly Spooky for you. So make sure you're back here first thing tomorrow to get even more spooky in your weekly. Halloween is the greatest time of the year, folks. And if you want to join us in keeping this rolling and rolling forever and ever, share the show with a friend. Share the show with somebody you know who loves scary stories and horror media. And if you want to do something a little bit more direct, you can go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month. You can support the show and get bonus content, or even join our Patreon podcast boosters. These are folks who've paid just a little bit more to hear their names on the show, and they are Johnny Nix, Bobbletopia.com, Megan Hua, Julia Kirsch, Brent McCullough, Steve King, Karen Weemet, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much. And if you want to join them, just head to weeklyspooky.com, click on Patreon, and choose any tier at $15 or higher. It's hugely appreciated. Also, I want to take a moment to say an extra special thank you to our brand new executive producer, Joshua Butler. Thank you so much, Joshua, for joining the spooky team. We really do appreciate it. But now, I have to get back to work. There's so much more spooky to bring you. 31 days, 31 shows, really is a whole hell of a lot. So for myself, for our other executive producer, Rob Fields, our producer, Dan Wilder, and our composer, Ray Mattis, I'll talk at you tomorrow.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.